So let me set the scene for you. I am in my second year of university, living in my very first apartment with my very first roommate on my own for the first time. This means I now have to cook and feed entirely for myself instead of relying on my meal plan. I'm a picky eater. I've just started to eat eggs. I really don't eat as many vegetables as I should. And I am a terrible, terrible cook. I'm talking I made a soup so good, my dad took my mom out for supper instead of staying home to eat what I cook. I'm talking my first week in my apartment, I managed to set the stovetop on fire, boiling water. So at this point, I'm terrified of giving myself food poisoning, and I'm having worse and worse reactions to milk. And I'm not talking like grumbly, tumbly, lactose intolerant. I'm talking lactose pills aren't working. I should go get an allergy test for the reaction I'm having, which I never end up doing. In the last 4 months of my first year at university, I managed to gain 22 pounds. Now this did coincide with me starting to lift weights, but I can't call it a bulk. You know, that would be generous. And even though I was still training and doing martial arts and that, I just was not feeling my best. So something had to change. For me, the change finally came when my roommate and I decided to do Lent together. We gave up all animal products for Lent. That is how I went vegan, and I will not lie. At the start, it was hard. It was kind of awful for me, at least. I no longer had any go-to meals. I no longer had any go-to snack. I was kind of starting my entire repertoire of food all over again. I was craving all my favorite foods. I was craving steak. I was craving bacon. I wanted jelly beans. And to top it all off, I was eating more vegetables and fruits in a day than I would normally in like a 2-week period. And I bloated so much. I was so uncomfortable. I looked pregnant. My body did not know what to do with itself. It was like actual food and nutrients. What's this? And it just went, and I was so uncomfortable. My pants wouldn't fit right. I was just all ballooned up and uncomfy. At the same time, I started to track my macros and my micros for the first time ever to make sure I was getting all the nutrients I needed, because I'm an iron deficient girly. So I wanted to stay on top of that. And to top it all off, as a picky eater who couldn't cook, I now had to learn to not only cook food, but cook food in a way that would trick me into eating vegetables and fruits like a youngster. I'm not proud of it. I used to cut up my vegetables small enough that I wouldn't notice them if I mixed them into rice and started to eat them like that. And then I just got lazier and lazier, and the chunks got bigger and bigger. And then I started to try out different recipes. And eventually my cooking did get better. It is so much better now. And I actually started to find like meals I enjoyed and quick and easy snacks and suppers I could prepare, so I wasn't feeling quite so lost. Around this time, my bloating was also starting to go away, and I was having way more energy. It was like I was getting a second wind when I was training. It was crazy. My body was finally receiving nutrients. It didn't know what to do. And by the end of those first few months, I had lost all 22 pounds that I had managed to put on in those last 4 months of my first year. I had to think. Yeah, so it took me 4 months to gain the 22 pounds, and by the end, a little after the end of Lent, I was down the 22 pounds and I was back to the weight I was when I started. The cravings I was having were starting to go away. I still had them every now and then, but they were a lot less intense than what they were at the start. And very rarely did I crave a chicken nugget or a strip of bacon by the end of it. I didn't really buy the fake replacement meat products because 1, I was cheap and they're expensive, and 2, they just weren't that tasty. I didn't really enjoy them. Although I've tried some now and they've gotten a lot better. Still too expensive. And then Lent was over, so technically I could go back to eating animal products again, but I was finding that I was really enjoying eating only plant-based meals, so I kept going. My grocery bills were so much cheaper. I'm not really sure if that would necessarily be the same thing now, but at the time I promise it was cheaper. In fact, the only reason I stopped being vegan initially was because I moved back to my rural mining town for the summer to take up a contract in between the semesters at school. And if there's one thing I know about most rural towns, it's that produce is not always the best. When it's several hours of dirt road into your town, everything has to be brought in by truck, things aren't gonna be as fresh as when you're near a city center. That's unfortunately just like the way it is. This meant that the produce was much less palatable, it was more expensive, and it went bad faster, so you had to eat it sooner, and you almost have to go to the grocery store a couple times in a week to get your fruits and vegetables just so it's fresh for you to eat. And despite the grocery store being so close to my house, I did not have that willpower. I was also back to living with my family, so then there were 5 of us in the house, and somebody would cook supper and there would be meat products in it. They did not use dairy because that makes me very, very ill, but there would be animal products cooked, and I was, you know, doing contract work in the mines, and after like a 12-hour shift, if you go home and someone someone has food cooked for you, you're just gonna eat whatever they made. So the decision at the time to stop being vegan was kind of out of convenience, more so than being displeased with the way I was eating. There were also minimal dairy-free alternatives in my town, so that didn't help. Going out to restaurants and only being able to eat French fries, not exactly appealing. Although I do love French fries, I won't lie. I still mostly just get French fries. So this pattern kind of continued, like when I'd go to school, I'd eat vegan. I was home, I would eat whatever was convenient in there, and this sort of happened until the pandemic happened. And then I kind of stayed home from school to be with my family and be at work and finish my school online and not pay rent in a city when I couldn't leave my apartment or dorm. And now, fast forward past the rest of my university experience, and now I've gone back to college, to school, because why not, I guess. And I'm 2 years essentially out of my town, and I'm still not vegan again. Why have I quit? At this point, I still don't eat milk, no dairy products, no whey, no lactose. The lactose pills don't help me. So in that sense, I'm not consuming dairy. I am, however, consuming eggs and meat again, those sorts of animal products. And I've had awful acid reflux, so I've kind of had to cut out gluten and any spicy, yummy foods and anything that's too acidic to try and manage that, because the medication gives me awful headaches, some ungodly. So with all of this happening, I don't really want to restrict myself any more than I have to. There's already certain vegetables and fruits that I can't eat. It's already bad enough for my poor family when I go visit. They don't know what to feed me or what I can eat when we go out, so it's just not feasible right now. And here's the other thing, I'm just a girl. I like steak, I like bacon, I like the occasional fried bologna with some mountains, which I now have to have no gluten in, and it's just not for me in this season of my life. But don't get me wrong, I still eat a lot of plant-based meals. I would say, in fact, 2/3 of what I eat is plant-based. It's mostly just either my supper or my lunch that'll have a little bit of meat in it. Rarely do I have more than 2 servings of meat a day, and I mostly just use eggs when I'm baking things. So I would say I'm largely still plant-based, but not vegan. But I'm so grateful for the time that I spent as a vegan, not consuming dairy and animal products, because it taught me how to cook. It taught me to be creative in the kitchen. It finally got me to eat a fruit and vegetable. I think being fully vegan or just plant-based is something you're considering trying. I'd absolutely recommend it. I have nothing but good things to say about my time not eating animal and dairy products, but also don't feel like you have to go all in. You can start small. You don't have to go cold turkey like I did. You can try having just 1 meal a day that's only like vegetables and grain, or you can try doing 2 meals a day, or changing out a snack. You don't have to fully dive in and consume absolutely no animal products at all, but it's okay to experiment and play around and try these things out. You don't know what you like until you try it. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.